Hi, Rojal. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome. We're so excited to have you here. And yes, let's start off with the basics. Who are you? What do you do? And just tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name's Rojal. I am a filmmaker and graphic designer. Started out in graphic design, but like slowly transitioned into filmmaking. I try to tell stories that is true to me and who I am as a person, and I like to give people the platform to express their true selves and not the stereotypes that we've been placed upon us.
I mean, it obviously goes without saying that cinematography, graphic design is like essential to the music and the wider like creative industry. I guess I'd love to know like how did you get involved in this side of it?
Since secondary school, I was always into like arts. I was always like drawing and stuff, and I was like the weird kid. Not the weird kid, but like I wasn't the cool kid. Like I was always known for like drawing and stuff. And I had a friend who was a musician, and again, no one really took him seriously because no one does. It's secondary school, but like we grew close together, and he had some songs that needed videos, and I was like, hey. I can do them for you if you want. And just like we just started building from there really. And then yeah, I shot more and more of his videos, did some other stuff with other people, but then transitioned more into graphic design and then went back to music and doing music videos, doing like behind the scenes for artists and stuff like that. And yeah, that's really it to be honest.
Yeah, that's a lot of different experience, but I guess as well, that's kind of how it goes in the sense that you're always transferring back and forth depending on the current needs at the moment. And
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
I felt that about secondary school. Like, no one takes it seriously whatsoever. But yeah, I guess like that's kind of the next thing in sense of that you've shot, curated, and also directed a lot of content for different types of things, DJs, behind the scenes, live work, podcasts. I'd love to hear more like about these experiences. How are they alike? How do they differ? Who have you worked with? Maybe even project examples. Just to get like a little idea of what it's like in those different sectors because they kind of differ from each other in different ways, right?
Oh, 100%. The technical aspects will always be the same. It's just like what you do with it, really. So with my first like job out of uni was like working with like a design agency. So that was a lot more corporate stuff, doing like corporate events. Where it's like there's not a lot of creative flair. You just have to capture what's there and just make it right and feel like professional, which was cool. And then I transitioned into like ed tech, like working filming with children, which was really interesting because I've never done that before. And like kids have got so much personality and flair, so it was like nice to like work with that, but then learn about the new rules about like consent and like making sure children are allowed to be filmed because of like security purposes and working with teachers as well. So that was like a really new experience. And then with like the creative industry, with like the music and stuff, that's where like you get your true creative flair where you can actually just work with people. That experience is quite fun, like seeing it from like start to finish. Like you have an idea, you hear a song, you kind of write to the song in the response. The artist might have an idea, but then you might have an idea and you try to mesh them together. And then you go from the directing to planning, shooting, and then I do a lot of my own editing. At the time, it was cool, but like after a while, it gets a bit strange trying to do everything at once. So I tried to transition purely to just like either directing or edit or shooting or editing. Like in the creative industry now, I started doing like behind the scene content, which was really great because it was like I got to see other people work and do the final product, and it really made me realize I need to let go of some of the stuff to let other people focus on one thing and then I can focus on the other. So I did a lot of that for like TV shows, just shooting behind the scene content, building relationships with like the talent and making sure that they feel comfortable with me being there so that the content can be better. Music videos, after a while, I just had enough of them. So I moved more into like film and TV where it's like, I wouldn't say it's more serious, but it's not music videos. I'm not dealing with like musicians with like low budget and massive egos. So that was fun to do that for like 2 years. But then I still like do like little music stuff on the side with like people that actually respect the craft. There's still a balance there and it's really nice.
No, that's amazing. Like a lot of different experiences as well, which is it's quite cool because you have like these different age groups, different people, different sides of the industry as well, and different needs met. which I think is really cool personally. I think that's really
Thank
awesome.
you.
What are some of the crucial things you would say people should know about the photo and video editing, directing, and shooting side within the music industry, but also the wider creative industry?
I think with music, sometimes it's good to know what you're shooting and like understand the music, understand the tempo of this track, because you can have a fast-paced song and if you shoot it at a slow pace with like minimal to no movement, it just feels weird. So you need to understand like the pacing that you're trying to edit to, and that will just dictate if you're going to use a gimbal, do fast movements, slow movements, etc., etc. And then with like the creative side of it, also knowing what equipment will be best needed in terms of lighting as well. It's important in your pre-production to figure out the location, shooting style, and just like the actual creative, so you have a plan. For the most part, it doesn't always stick to plan because things can happen, but it's good to have a plan in place to know that when you're on set or wherever you are, you can just think on your feet, research as much as possible when doing this stuff as well. Because even though you might have a plan of stuff, there might be something that you just think of on the fly based off an image, off a reference that you saw, and you just get it. And so half the time it is usually better than what you've already planned. One thing with musicians, right? When they see the footage on the day, they love it, but you behind the camera, you know that the energy was off and it doesn't match. So it's like it's always good to get safeties when you shoot because you know what's gonna happen when you edit. And I've had it so many times and it's like the most infuriating thing. So you trying to aim to overshoot. So when you edit, even though you have loads of takes, you know that the artist can pick the right ones for the video. The editing process depends on how people work. Some people like to do it themselves. For me, I like to watch everything first before I dump it into the timeline. I like to organize it so I know, okay, these are the B rolls, this is the tracks, these are the B rolls, and just like label everything and put it where I need it to be, cut it, get approval first, then do the special effects, color grade, etc. Get final approval, and then if there's any little touch ups that need to be done, then do that. As opposed to doing everything first and then sending it. It's just very good to like make it a collaboration as opposed to a job where it's like, hey, you have to like this. No, it's like you have to be working together. And I think that makes the process a whole lot easier. That's what I try to do as much as I can. And then, yeah, final product. If they're happy with it, they're happy with it.
Yeah, I think we sometimes like forget how much goes into video editing and video shooting and also just like set wise, like directing and like because yeah, you're gonna love it on the day, energy's high, everyone's excited, and then you get behind the camera and
Yeah,
afterwards it's one of those things where it's like, ooh, you know what? I'm not sure about that shot. And it's very complicated, it's very time consuming as well.
exactly. Yeah.
My next question has to be, how do videographers struggle for recognition in an industry that is constantly focused on the star in front of the camera?
That is a very great question. For me, I'm for the crew. I will always be for the crew. As much as the artist is the star of the show, it's a collaboration where someone still needs to capture you doing what you're doing. I hate having like egos and stuff like that on set. And it's like you need to realize everyone's working for each other in this moment. You have to see bigger than just yourself. You have to see the project first, then yourself. And if everyone's doing well, then on set and this whole process, then it's going to be great. This industry is very cliquey and it's very political, I would say, where it's like only a handful of people, like there's like five directors that just get circled around all the time. Same with like videographers, and it's like the same 5 to 6 people constantly being used. So like it's a bit of a dogfight, and there's because of that it creates a lot of ego as well. Sometimes when I do like some music videos and there's like another crew, they're like looking at you as if like you're ops, and it's just like you're not. And there's just this weird competitiveness where it's like we're fighting the same fight here. Ego can only take you so far. So like being a decent person is half of it. And I think once you have a good rapport with people in terms of personality, they'll then see your work and then go, oh, hey, I like this person. I'm going to hire him. And and sometimes, even if you might not even be the best person for the job, you're getting hired based on just who you are as a person and your work ethic. That's how I built the recognition that I got. It was just more down to who I was as a person, my professionalism, etc., etc. So that when jobs progressively got bigger, they knew I was able to do the job and be a decent human being and make sure that everything's being done properly.
It's so interesting, like when you talk to people about the industry, there's always this note about just be a good person. Like, and you would think that's so
Exactly.
easy, right? You would think
Yeah.
that's simple. But a lot of and people listen to that advice and they're like, yeah, just be nice. But it's actually a lot harder when you actually get in the industry because of the competition, you know,
Yeah.
and on one point you can't blame people, but on the other side, it's like there's no need. We're all in the same playing field in a sense. We're all like trying to get recognized for our work, right? What would you say has been the hardest thing that you've learned from the industry that kind of, I don't want to say a reality slap, but something that you really had to process and it was quite difficult to like actually ponder on?
I would say being humble was the big one for me. I think a few years ago I was on this high where I was like I was doing these massive jobs and I was like, hey, look at me. I wouldn't say I was that ego guy, but I was a bit too confident in myself sometimes, and I didn't have the skills to match at that time. And when I transitioned to film and TV, there was so much I didn't know about working on set that I thought I knew. And I was in like a Zoom meeting with like someone that's been in the industry for like 30 plus years. And yeah, she just gave me the telling that I really needed to really just go back to basics and actually learn every department, everyone does what they do. And that was the biggest thing for me. I think for that, it kind of made me who I am now, whereas like I'm less selfish on set. I'm not like holding on to like the camera all the time. I'm fine to just give it to someone who's better than me. I think that's the biggest thing, being like humble and knowing what you're good at and play to your strengths rather than your weaknesses. Like I think I'm a good videographer, but there's better videographers that only do videography or cinematography. Let them do the job, and then I can just focus on like the directing or the editing or this or that, as opposed to trying to wear so many hats at once.
It's difficult because I guess like it's always this kind of thing where we always want to be improving ourselves and our craft, and it doesn't mean you can't, right? Like you can always learn something new, but it's exactly remembering that, right? Of there's always more to learn. You're not the master at the top quite yet, or maybe not for
Exactly.
many years. And there's nothing wrong with that because there is a certain beauty in learning as well. But letting go is tough. It's really
Yeah,
tough.
exactly.
Exactly. When you want to be
Exactly.
like, I can do this, you know, I'm capable of doing it. It's so tough sometimes to just let go and let other people do it. And it's a difficult one. Like even I'm thinking about it, I'm like, I struggle with that sometimes too,
Yeah, it's really hard
different ways,
sometimes.
right?
For me, like growing up, I had to do, for the most part, I had to do everything myself because of like secondary school, like traumatic experience where it was just like I had to do design, had to do this, I had to do that. And I was not scared to ask for help, but it was just like, how do I ask for help in a way that reflects who I am as a person? And I think as creatives, it is really hard for us to do it sometimes, but then there's no shame in doing that because I think everyone has their own speciality, so it might as well use that and work to your advantage.
No, absolutely. I mean, talking about your personal projects, I actually want to ask you about your spoken word project. It's so cool. It's honestly
Thank you.
awesome. And again, poetry, music, it's the same lane, right? And spoken word is one of those things that is just so beautifully raw at its core between its intersection of being both poetry and music, right? I'd love to just know more about that project itself, what went into it, to explain it a little bit as well to other people what it is. Yeah,
Sure.
if you could tell us about it, please.
So my latest one is called Who You Loyal To, and the backstory to that one was chaotic. I was working in the film industry, but I was like working film, but then I was also doing like social media, like high profiles, red carpets, all that stuff, but as well as music. And I think it was 2021 where like I was doing all these massive jobs, but like my invoices hadn't been paid for like months. And I'm frustrated, but I don't know how to release it. So I just like put in a poem. And then on a job that I was doing, I fell off a stage while shooting, and I tore my quad, and like it was in front of like loads of people, and it was pretty traumatic. But then I can't work right now. This is the perfect opportunity to just do the film. I kind of did it in secret, where I was just like, do you know what? I'm not going to tell people I'm doing the film. I'm just going to write the film, do a script, storyboard, plan it, whatever. This was great because it was the DOP that shot it, Zane. He reached out to me earlier in the year, but I just didn't have a project to say, hey, let's do something. So I was like, hey, let's do this. I knew where I wanted to do locations and shots. I just couldn't walk. So I was like to him, hey, do you mind scouting for me? Tell me what you think of it. If you're happy with it, I'll book it, no problem. And that's what we did. And he came around, we discussed it, we planned it out. And it was just nice to work with someone else to do it. And like he knew the shots. I just said, here's a reference. And he's like, yeah, cool, no problem. the poem itself was just more about my experiences, about loyalty, and like figuring out like who am I loyal to? Is like, am I loyal to myself? Because loyalty for me would like be like looking after my mental and physical health, which I've been working on like since, and it's been incredible process. Am I loyal to the money or the highest bidder in the sense of the clients? Like whoever's paying me the most, I'm gonna run to them essentially. And I use different situations. The first situation was a music video where it's like you're a videographer and it's like dealing with the egotistical artist that has no money but wants the most but doesn't respect you enough. And I had that quite a bit. So I wanted to highlight that. The second opportunity was working in an office where the manager knows that I had a crush on her, and like she would try to make me do extra work
Oh
either
no.
for free or whatever. And like I kind of
Oh.
clocked that she clocked that and it was taking advantage of that. Once I realized it, I was like, absolutely not. So I wanted to highlight that. And the third one was it was like me in the future where it's like, hey, if I win this award, are you now gonna say you only won it because of me, of the other person, as opposed to being a collaboration and like using that as leverage like in the future where it's like, oh well, I did this for you, you now need to do this for me, sort of thing. I wanted to use those three situations within that one self-contained story. It was something that was like a release to get off my chest, to be like, okay. The day of shooting was fun because like all three of those scenes was shot in like one studio. So we just constantly moved around the room in the studio to do that. And it was just so cost effective and everyone knew what they were doing. And like everyone on set I've already worked with. So I knew their pacing of work. They knew me. The only person I hadn't worked with like on a set was the DOP, and it was amazing. It was like the best day. But we ran out of time. Of course I wasn't working. So it's like, oh my God, I need to pay for another day of studio. So like I had applied for a grant, didn't hear anything, didn't think I accepted it. And at the end of the month, I got an email, hey, we liked your project so much. Here's a grant. And I received a grant to help finish off the filming. And because I'm very pro paying people, I know what it's like to not be paid on a job, so I didn't want to do that. So made sure everyone was paid. Released it, yeah, a year ago in March.
That's amazing. Like, first of all, love like how you're talking about the effectiveness of space. I think like that's a really key thing to take away, right? That no matter how small the area is, if you can transform it correctly, you can use every part of it.
Exactly, yeah.
Another thing, congratulations on getting the grant. It's such a nice note to like know that there are other people who are like, we will fund you because of the fact that we believe in your project and we believe in your dream. And I think that speaks for itself when people go and see the spoken word video itself. It's incredible. And also just the fact, again, pro pay, making sure that everyone on that set got what they needed. It's so important. And it's tough, you know, it is really tough, especially when you're not like on that famous level to get paid yourself and to pay others, but if you can, do what you can. Also, I have to say, like, thank you for being so vulnerable because it's so hard to open up about these things that I'm
Yeah.
like these are traumatic experiences, I swear.
Yeah, honestly, I think as a creator, you have to be vulnerable because you don't realize someone else might need to hear what you have to say, or you say it in a way that they didn't know they needed to hear it in.
Absolutely. I really appreciate that. Continuing on with your projects, I'd love to also hear more about other work you have done, such as your 61st Jamaican Independence Day video, live videos as well of live artists to just understand what went into that. Was there any
So,
really cool experiences, especially with like the live music scene that you really enjoyed? Just tell us a little bit more about that.
so the 61st Independent wasn't actually my project. It was something that I was brought onto. Shamara Roper, she's a hairstylist. She's incredible. She does these really cool, intricate, fun hair pieces for loads of celebrities. And she reached out to me, asking if I wanted to do something. And what was really interesting that everyone on set was Jamaican, and I was like the first thing I've ever experienced where it's just like everyone's from the same place, everyone understands it. But in terms of the video, I kind of had a bit of free reign with that, where it was like document the hairstyles in a way that made it fun and it was cool and it was sexy. And we wanted to go with like a proper like yardy track. And we just sat down, found a track that worked, and like I wanted to edit it like a proper like early 2000s with basic font in the corner of the text, like just having like cool motion and dancing and stuff like that. So that was just such a fun experience to be a part of. With the live shows, I didn't realize how much I did until like I looked through my like Instagram. But my two favorite ones has been with Saya, incredible artist. He reached out and he was like, hey, I want to do a live performance of my song. And again, it was just collaborating with loads of different people. That was an incredible experience. And the second one I did was with Amala. She is incredible. She's a soul artist, and she had a song called Enough. And the first time I met her, we did a studio recording, and it was like a live piano session. And that video hasn't been released, but like that was like one of the few videos where I was like, I really enjoyed doing this. And she's just such a lovely person, and like we've been collaborating and working together since. I did like behind scenes for her music videos, and just like catching her, and I love capturing people in their element, and to capture her on a live stage with a sold out crowd was incredible. So yeah, those were like the two that I loved the most. I did do an interesting one with Version Music, where we got to film in the Tate Museum.
That's so cool.
Yeah, literally. So like it was completely empty. They brought in their sound system and all sorts, and we're in the corridors. Like usually it's so rampacked, and it was just dead quiet, playing reggae music, and that was pretty sick to like do behind the scene content.
My next question has to do with the possibilities that you see coming up for videography and photography in the future, but also are there places, potentials that artists have not been tapping into, or even videographers that you would love to see more exploration within?
I think for the future, I think right now it feels a little bleak. I think especially in the UK, record labels like cutting back on like funding for stuff. It just feels like limited for work. Everyone's in that same situation where it's like, when's the next job coming in? Especially with like iPhones and all this stuff, and where it's like, oh, I've got a phone in my hand, it's this quality, I can do that. I can just do it myself. And it's like, there's only so much you can do with a phone, and there's only so much of it. Like a videographer can see things that you can't. And right now, I just don't see it being taken as seriously as it should, which is pretty unfortunate. And I just hope that it progresses to in a place where like we're valued for what we do and what we bring to like the culture, which leads into like there's so many unspoken stories within the communities of people doing good things, whether it's in music, whether it's in art, where it's just like community stuff in general. For me personally, I love telling those types of stories. So I feel like we need to tap into that more. I recently came across a video in Hackney. There's this park called Hackney Walk, and it was done up just after the 2011 riots, where some funding came in, but they made it into these like luxury boutique stores, and now they've all been abandoned for like the past 5 years or so. That should have been funding that should have gone for the community. And it was just talking about how like artists and creators should be able to use that space. For me, it would be nice to like find those people, to interview those people and say, hey, these are the creatives that we have in the community. Give them that space to do what they need to do, because studio space is so expensive and it's really hard, because Hackney is just filled with so many talented musicians. This place is so special for that, and that's what I've been trying to do. And I hope a lot more people might tap into that and just like document those people.
It's getting so much more difficult, and I really resonate with what you said there in terms of just doing projects that involve bringing more people in, having multiple talents there, and also having the facilities to do so.
100%. I think for me, growing up, like I've always had to fight that perception. Like I'm 6'2", and like I had a nasty growth spurt when I was like 13. So I was tall and I looked older for my age. And everyone just assumed that I was a gang member or like a roadman, and I did all of that stuff. And I've always had that since I was a kid, racism, all of that. So for me, I've always wanted to create content that just defies the odds, define the stereotypes of who I am and how society views me. So like with me, when it comes to like musicians, I want them to have that space to say, hey, I'm not what you think society has told me who I am. So being able to like highlight those stories in particular where they're defining the odds is something that I really want to do and let people have, because we don't have that platform. We don't have that space to do that. So it's just like diversifying that sort of like content where it's like, if you're gonna do the hood stuff, do the hood stuff, but also recognize that there's like regular musicians and artists and creatives that might look like you but are doing something completely different.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that as well. Because, yeah, again, categorizing people into one stereotype or one notion, especially when it comes to the creative arts, is absolutely ridiculous, considering that the arts is meant to be something that is so multiplied, so like variable in the sense of the types of content people are creating, the types of people making the art. My
No.
next question has to do mainly with just your advice for people who want to get into the video and photographic industry.
I think it's easy to see like photographers with like these massive cameras, these massive setups, and think, I need that to be a cameraman or a photographer, all of that, right? You can start with your phone, learn the basics of like photography, going online and just like going out and trying stuff for yourself to just get yourself familiar and find your style. And then as you gradually build, start reaching out to businesses, companies, personalities. Hey, I'm a photographer. Would it be possible to document you or whatever, as opposed to just thinking because you do now do photography, you should get work. And that's not always the case. You have to like go out and get it yourself. I think that a lot of the jobs and the situations where I've had jobs and positions is because I reached out. Sometimes they might not respond, but there's always a chance that someone will. I think you have to be proactive in that sense and just learn from trial and error.
What's next for you and what are you currently working on? Where are you at the moment?
I've decided to stop with videography. I realized that as good as I am, I'm not the best, and like I just don't enjoy being on set anymore. So I decided to step back from that and just to focus more on my graphic design, more video editing as opposed to being on set. So like there's still an element of video, but just more on the edit side rather than being the one filming it. I do still want to make films. I still want to make like short form and long form content, but just right now I'm just like trying to find myself and figure out what's the best route for me.
I want to say thank you so much for joining us.
No
It's been so
worries.
insightful just to learn about your journey and also just to hear about your experience and just letting us into your head a little bit.